I'm delighted to be joined by Nathalie McGloin, all the way from, where are you based, Nathalie? Where can we find you?
Just outside Silverstone.
There we go. So Nathalie is the FIA Disability and Accessibility Commission President. I got that title right.
That's right.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll go into that in a second. Thankfully, I got that all okay. Thank you very much for joining us on the Motorsport UK channels here this evening. We're just having a bit of a break from the karting esports action you may have seen from the last couple of evenings. The final is tomorrow. We have a nice gap in the proceedings to have a bit of a Q&A and sort of bring it down a bit and have a bit of a chat, all things motorsport. And Nathalie, let's wind the clock back. Let's go to the very beginning. How did your motorsport journey start?
Motorsport for me, I think, is a kind of more familiar story than you kind of think, where if you haven't been into karting from a young age, I find that, speaking with my fellow racers, that track days is quite an accessible route in for people. And that's how I got involved with motorsports. I was playing wheelchair rugby, kind of at a professional level, if you can kind of call it that, when I was involved, kind of training 4 or 5 days a week, Paralympic ambitions. And I was introduced to track days by a teammate, and I fell in love with it. And it just kind of progressed from there. And it was an expensive hobby, I guess, whilst I was training to try and make it to London 2012. And through one reason or another, I fell out of love with rugby and fell properly in love with kind of motorsport in its very, very early stages, and kind of developed it from there. And before I knew it, I'd entered myself into the Porsche Club Championship, and the rest is kind of history. So yeah, I think it's a familiar story, but probably less familiar details, if you like.
So actually, it's quite fairly recent. If we're talking sort of London 2012, we're talking about 10 or so years ago. What was that sort of? Everyone remembers that first motorsport experience. What was it like for you? You said, you know, you got into a Porsche, so it wasn't exactly like a straightforward step, was it?
Well, I'd learned how to track drive in a 911, and it was all I get emotionally attached to things that shouldn't be emotionally attached to, and it always had to be a Porsche for me. And the Cayman, I believed, was the best kind of vehicle for that, because it had a PDK box. I didn't have the luxury of going into something really light and kind of your organic first racing car, because of the transmission that I need. Because my disability affects my hands, I can't change gear effectively. I'm sure that there's a solution out there, but you know, track driving, I left the car in automatic mode, and the Cayman had a PDK gearbox, which was perfect for what I wanted, and the mid-engine as well, a bit more forgiving than a 911. And so that was my first racing car. And yeah, the first race was interesting. I had almost written the car off the first test day before. So Brands Hatch, Paddock Hill Bend, probably a lot of people have some story or another about that corner. And I hadn't long had my racing license, and I think I'd only driven the car once on slicks at Bedford. And I went in, and I thought I was going in too quickly. I lifted mid-corner, lost control of the car, and it went into the gravel trap and almost went onto its roof. I mean, the angle was, I don't know how it didn't fall onto its roof. But that was then my last memory before I went out for my first ever qualifying, which wasn't great.
Well, they used to say you weren't shy, you went straight in. There was no that's a pretty demanding corner. And so that, obviously, incident aside, how did the rest of it go?
So qualifying went really badly. I'd forgotten how to drive, and I qualified second from last. And I thought, my worst fear is about to be realised. I'm going to finish last in my first ever race. People are going to think I'm well out of my depth. And I think I finished 14th out of 21. and lap times were fairly credible. I think I did a 56 round Brands Hatch Indy, which obviously is not my best lap time these days, but for a first attempt in a car of that caliber, I had no idea what that meant, but people said that was decent. So yeah, it was. It's one of those things where I do quite a lot of corporate speeches, and I try and talk about that first race, and I can't put it into dialogue that is sensible. So,
Was it literally a blur, or was it there was so much going on that you had to factor on? And also, you've done test days, but also you had people either side of you now, so they had that to factor in as well.
yeah, I had done test days. I see Darren Langevel's just popped up on the feed. I'd done a lot of test days with Darren, but they were track days. They weren't test days. My first ever test day was the day before my first ever race. My license was rubber stamped on the Wednesday, and I was racing on the Saturday. So I did a lot of testing with Darren and Andrew, my partner, and other people on track days. But I think the test day, it was almost as important as the race for me, because, different rules, the kind of the first experience of using my license. I had enough experience under my belt to be confident in racing. I've been doing track days for kind of 6 years, and I'd done the necessary training with people that knew what they were doing. And it wasn't like I just threw myself into it because I thought I'll give this a go. I think that, motorsport's not something that you should just kind of go into blind. I think that training, experience, there's nothing that can substitute seat time, whether that's on a track day or a test day or a rally experience day. I think they're all really important first steps before you consider going racing.
Yes, it's so massively vitally important. And you said, was it 56? You said around Brands Indy? Was it 56? You said?
Yeah, it was in the 56s.
So what are we doing now? What can Nathalie do around the Indy circuit?
Well, so I crashed my car in 2017 quite badly at Paddock. Wasn't my fault. Wheel bearing collapsed, but my quickest time then I think was a 54.3, and that was on old rubber. So I knew that I could potentially get into the 53s. And racers love dining out on that, don't they?
I'm
This
sure.
is my fastest time, but it would have been really much quicker if X, Y, and Z had happened. But yeah, I don't think I've broken 54. I've been low 54s, but I'm happy-ish with that.
Oh, ish. Ever the racing driver. There's always there's a few temps to find here.
Always.
There's always a book of excuse. I'm sure it's behind you somewhere.
Many books.
Chapter and verse, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So you've obviously the Porsche is as a brand, as a mark, and as a car, it's been very close to your heart. What have you had to do to that car to get it to your liking? So obviously it's not necessarily a standard car, is it? You've done obviously yet to modify competition, but also to get it to your liking as well. What have you had to do for those that don't perhaps know the sort of that link between the road car to your race car?
Yeah. So the modifications in terms of the championship, because I raced in Porsche Club only for the first 4 years, I think, or the first 3 years maybe. It's based on a road car, and there are regulations that mean that the upgrades or the modifications are fairly they're not as liberal as some of the other championships. But in terms of my kind of control of the car in reference to my disability, I have hand controls to the right hand side of the steering wheel, which are connected by a rod to the pedals. So there's nothing electronic in terms of any wiring or whatever that connects my hand to the brake. It's just an extension of the pedal, if you like. And there's a lever to the side of the steering wheel that I push forward to brake and push down to accelerate. And the mechanism allows me to do both at once, so I can effectively left foot brake. And I've also had the steering lightened. So the The modification for that, I still don't fully understand, but I am told that they've shaved the pinion. And I don't know whether that means that there's then more pressure in the hydraulics or if it's something else. But the steering's been lightened by 50%, not through any electronic pump or anything, just through this modification, which is something that quite a few people with disabilities have done to their road car. For me personally, I wouldn't need that doing to any of my road cars because my strength in my arms is good enough to not need that. But racing on slicks in you know, in a Cayman, which the steering isn't naturally very light. I raced without the steering lightened for 2 years, and the difference when I had it done was night and day. So they're the only modifications I've had done kind of permanently to the car. I also have like a seat insert, which I know a lot of drivers do have when they go racing, but mine's particularly important because I'm paralyzed from the chest down, so I have no sensation in my kind of lower half. So I don't feel the car through my bum like most drivers do. So the seat insert kind of wraps around my rib cage, and it just helps me feel the car and connect with the car more than kind of just being a bit loose in the seats. And that was done by Indy Seats, who have done all of my seats, and they were really, really sympathetic to my condition and stuff. And I found like with motorsport companies that once you find one who's sensitive to your kind of needs, whether you're disabled or not, you just get a bit more kind of like trust in your equipment. And the seat insert was like, it made quite a difference. And if I ever get like disabled people coming to me asking for like pointers for track days or anything like that, the first thing I will say to them is get seat insert, because it'll just help you connect with the car better.
No, absolutely. It's like you say, it's not just it's the seats, the car, it's the whole package, and you've got to make it feel comfortable. And once you find that supply, whether it be, you know, the same certain helmet, overalls. I know a lot of competitors will always do a certain brand, and that's it. They'll stick with that for years. So once you're comfortable, it will, like you say, it will help you progress on the circuit. So we mentioned you starting in the sports just before. Obviously, you were doing wheelchair rugby. Then you got into motorsport. But fast forward now, you have a rather fancy FIA title. You do lots of Motorsport UK. So tell us about what's the sort of day-to-day sort of projects that we're working on now, Nathalie.
So we're doing quite a lot with the FIA in terms of trying to encourage more disabled people to come into motorsport, because when I got involved with motorsport, it happened completely by accident. You know, I was in a completely different sport. I was actually in Toulouse when I met the guy who introduced me to track days, and you know that conversation would never have happened if it wasn't for, you know, a number of different situations. I wasn't interested in motorsport in the least before that. So I think a lot of disabled people do not understand that this sport is for us. It's for everyone. So what we're trying to do with some of the projects with my commission is just trying to make that awareness and highlight some of the really fantastic things that disabled people are doing in motorsport. I mean, you know, Billy's one of the great examples, and Alex Zanardi as well. But there are much kind of lower level club racers who are doing equally incredible things that just aren't kind of in the media. And I think once disabled people see someone like them, either with their level of disability or their age or their gender, or just something that they recognize and they can connect with, they can start to appreciate that actually this is something very accessible that anyone can do. So we're trying to think about ways to kind of get that message out there and get to some like mobility shows to reach out to kind of a different demographic than people that are already involved in the sport. We've also been working on something called the Certificate of Adaptations, which allows homologated cars that have to run with adaptations due to disability to compete in their class. We had a classic example with Alex Zanardi when he competed in Daytona in 2019, where because there was no legislation that stated that adaptations due to disability were classed as part of the homologated car, there was talk about him not being able to run in his class. So the certificate of adaptations was to help people make sure that disabled drivers can do what they need to do in their class, and they're not subcategorized into something that is a different class for reasons of disability. And that's taken a lot of work, and it's now live with the FIA, and it's something that we're hoping will again branch out motorsport so that once disabled people are involved in it, there's no barrier to the type of car or the type of competition they can get into. We've also created the Disabled Drivers Grant, which gives disabled drivers access to the highest level safety gear, so fire suits, underwear, shoes, gloves, fuel cell, and fire extinguisher. There is a grant application that you can go through your ASN. ASN Motorsport UK is the ASN for the UK. And it means that you can access this equipment through a grant scheme so that your participation in motorsport is the safest it could be with a disability that potentially creates an added difficulty when getting out of a car in an emergency. And there's lots of other projects going on as well, but they're the main ones that we're focusing on, and we have been doing for, before this weird situation of lockdown kicked off.
No, absolutely. It's weird is probably a way definitely to describe this, but you very much touched on a really good point there, actually, was that motorsport is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very much a sport which it doesn't have many barriers. I think there's a lot of, doesn't matter if you're men, women, disabled or not, actually you can compete in the same field, in the same rally or whatever it may be, and have the opportunity and be as one. You're enjoying the sport and going for that one common goal.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to highlight. John Henderson just asked the questions about marshalling and officials, and the work of the commission is very much promoting motorsport to anyone that wants to be involved, whether that's a spectator and making motorsport venues more accessible, whether that's a driver and making the licensing requirements safe and fair, or marshalling and volunteers and officials and making disabled people aware of the roles that are available to people with disabilities in all aspects of motorsport. And we've actually just done a really nice case study on a Mexican Grand Prix scrutineer called Andres, who was paralyzed in a bike accident on the road on a push bike. And I think it was a very short time after, maybe less than a year, that he went back to the circuit. And then a short time after that he actually scrutineered at the Formula E. And there's a really nice case study on that with video of him in action, and we're using that to try and promote to people with disabilities that volunteers and officials is for you. And if there are any inquiries about that, to get in touch, and we can put you in touch with the relevant people to tell you what's available to you, because we're very aware as a commission that being a racing driver isn't the sole occupation in motorsport. There are a whole range of different tasks and different roles that people can take, and we're very much wanting to open that up to everyone.
Absolutely. It's a great question from John Henson there, talking about what Motorsport UK and the FIA are doing to make the sport more accessible, not just obviously for competitors, but for marshals, officials, and other bits and pieces like that. But yeah, thank you very much, John. Great question. If you do have any questions, do pop them below. We do have Nathalie for a little bit more yet. I'm not going to let her go just yet. We've got a few questions already stacking, which is brilliant. So do keep them coming. This is a perfect opportunity to dial in and tap into some great motorsport minds. And hopefully this will be the first of many we're going to be running over the course of this strange times, weird times, whatever you want to call it. So one of the first questions that came in was from John Brownlee. Said, Nathalie, tell us about your hill climbing exploits at Lowton Park.
So when I first inquired about getting my license, the procedure with Motorsport UK was that disabled people had to compete in 4 hill climb or sprint events to qualify them to undertake an ARDS test. Now that's been changed, and disabled people do not have to do anything over and above able-bodied people in terms of testing. It's an ARDS test as it would be for an able-bodied person, and the only extra requirement is some medical paperwork, which is the same for anyone with a medical condition applying for a motorsport license. But one of the hill climbs I did participate on was at Lowton Hill, and that was interesting in a very heavy, very powerful 911 turbo, which didn't...
I imagine not the car. You probably would have wanted a little Jedi or something a little bit more, a little whippier, maneuverable thing, I guess.
Definitely. It was one of those kind of experiences where I kind of thought, oh, this could go horribly wrong. I'd never done a hill climb before, and I can remember my partner Andrew and Darren Langeveld were there with me, and I went for my first practice run, and I came in and they said, oh, how did you do? And I was a bit flustered. I said, oh, I came off. I managed to get back on, but it didn't go very well. And I can remember them both kind of looking at me as if to go, no, you didn't come off. If you come off here, you hit a tree. And then they went around the other side of the car and saw all the mud. They said, oh, you come off. Yes. But that was really fun. It was kind of, that was my second hill climb or sprint event. The first one I did was at North Weald, where I actually won my class. Which was...
Darren's that's just literally pinged in. Darren's not letting you forget that you won your first sprint.
I did. That was so much fun. Like my first introduction to competitive motorsport, and it was freezing. It was so cold, and it was quite barren, and I think it was held alongside some kind of stance, like the car meets that have all of the cars with all of like the ironing boards on the bottom. I can't remember.
Oh, okay, like a. Are we talking boy racer crowds here?
Yes.
All that sort of thing. Okay, almost like the old Max Power sort of image.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'd never been to a motorsport event before, so I'm queuing up to get in at 7:30 in the morning, thinking, all of these other cars look a bit weird. Like, how are they going to drive around like a course without scraping those splitters off the front of them? And I thought that was my competition for the day, but it was, they went one way and we went the other, so that was fine. But the day was just, it was such a nice introduction to motorsport. And I've since been back to sprints whilst I've been a racer, because I just find them so much fun, and they're really good value for money. And you can go in your road car. You don't have to trailer a racing car. It's much more accessible for disabled people starting out in the sport to just go and give it a try. And I've looked at doing North Weald again, but it's always clashed with my racing calendar. But I thoroughly recommend hill climb and sprint events to anyone, either racer or newbie, because they're relaxed, they're fun, and if you win a trophy, it's even better.
Absolutely. It sounds like you've got to go back and win a few more trophies there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for those questions coming in. Absolutely superb. If you've got any more, this is the perfect time to pick Nathalie's brain. There's a few questions we'll just clear up before we go into a few other sort of topics. First one from Kevin Gray. I don't think, Nathalie, you can probably answer this one. Maybe you can, I don't know. Maybe I could leave you to it. But what is the plan for rallying to come back? Will they be allowed this year, and the amounts of people involved, or will it be just spectator 3? The answer is we don't know. As I'm sure everyone is aware, until the 30th of June this year, motorsport is suspended in this country. And at the minute, we are obviously reviewing it on a day by day. We've seen a few other countries push larger scale events back until at least the 1st of September. So at the minute, unfortunately, the answer is we know as much as you guys. We're obviously following the government's advice, and once we can get out racing, go and compete, go and watch, go and officiate, marshal, it will be great. We look forward to that moment. But at the minute, unfortunately, I have to sit tight and just see what the score is. But obviously, 30th of June in this country, sport is suspended until. we're obviously reviewing on a day-by-day basis. And the other one was actually, it's a quite interesting one, actually, from Peter Anthony. I guess, apologies if it was if I misunderstood it. Peter Anthony said, "What is your impression of the sudden rise of iRacing?" So obviously, esports is becoming, it has been, and especially it has been turbocharged the last couple of weeks because of the situation we're in. Has that been something which you've taken a bit of a keen eye to? Never thought, oh, I'd give that a go. Is there this no substitute for real racing, perhaps?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that iRacing is a great sport on its own. I think it's also a great tool for racers to do whilst they are not able to get to a racing circuit. It's obviously completely different, but I think the fundamentals are interchangeable with iRacing and actual competition on a racing circuit. And it's something that has been growing for a good year now. And the FIA have put iRacing firmly on the calendar with their events that they're doing. I forget the name of the event that they held in Rome last year. It's a joint. Oh my
Was it the World Motorsport Games? Was that the events?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was one of the major events in that on that weekend. But I also think that iRacing is really, really good for disabled people because it's something that if you're struggling to get out of the house through medical or, social anxiety or anything like that, you can get involved with iRacing on any number of different equipments. If you've got a full sim, great, but you can do it on an Xbox. And I really think that going into this isolation that we're experiencing, it's a great substitute for racing, but I think coming out the other side of it, we'll see a surge in it more because I think that people will have kind of stumbled across it by accident or by necessity, and I think that the enjoyment will be there, that they'll want to carry it on. And I myself I've got a sim. I'm waiting for it to be adapted. My mechanic has it at the moment, and once that's up and running, I'll be getting involved. I mean, I don't think I'll be very good because I've never done it before, but I'm really excited about trying it out and seeing what it has to offer. So I think it's great. I really do.
Well, you set the bar very high. You've won your first ever sprint, so we're looking at your first ever sort of esports win in the near future, Nathalie. You've heard it here first. But
Fingers crossed.
Absolutely, and it's one of those where, like you said, it doesn't matter necessarily who you are. You can literally, if you've got a full sim setup, great. But you literally, with your Xbox, or PlayStation, or PC, you can get involved. There's obviously the last couple of days we've had the Easter series of the British kart British Kart Championship in esports form, and we're also looking to launch a rallying one very soon. You've heard it here first. So Motorsport UK, we're having a rallying one, which will be open, hopefully using the Dirt 2.0 program, which will be quite exciting for anyone to get involved. Have you found that as something which is quite good? Obviously, isolation. As a racing driver, you like to keep fit, keep active yourself when we have been out and about. But what have you been up to kind of to keep yourself busy whilst we've been in sort of isolation and lockdown?
So I've been trying to keep fit. I've got my wheelchair rugby chair that I can just jump into, and I've made a little circuit on my drive and my patio, which is good. I think that people can just make use of what they've got. I think we have to in this time. I'm quite fortunate that I've got a shed in my garden that's a home gym for me that I can use. So been getting into that, which is a kind of a nice opportunity to be able to use, because I've been so busy over the past kind of 2 years that has taken a bit of a back seat. So I think that with any situation, it's really nice to find silver linings with stuff. So this isolation has forced me into using that and trying to focus on my fitness. So that's something I'm quite thankful for. Also been doing quite middle-aged things like growing vegetables and different bits and pieces like that. Just arranging the garage and we've got a new cat that decided to move in with us a couple of months ago. Nice to spend a bit of time with her. So things that you'd otherwise consider as things that are quite boring in normal kind of circumstances that I'm actually really enjoying. And I think it is quite nice to be able to just kind of take stock and do some of the things that actually just relax you and aren't kind of full speed ahead. It's I think if anyone can take the opportunity to just wind down a bit with this, then that's good. And I don't saying that I'm not making light of any of the situations with finance or people that aren't able to access the health service and different things that are causing massive problems. Yes, I appreciate that they are, for some people, very, very difficult times. So, I say I'm thankful for stuff, and I say try and use what you've got, with at the same time appreciating that that's not everyone's luxury. So, it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to. It is. I don't think anyone in will ever experience this. Possible. We hope not. Again, in anyone's lifetime,
Gotcha.
it's something which go previous generations is. We've got to go a long way back to sort of have something that's sort of similar to into these conditions. But you have to sometimes see the funny side of things, little things that keep you going, little projects, because that's kind of what we do like this. It's quite nice to hear that the likes of I'm sure you've had meetings with the FIA, and you are human. You look after cats and you grow vegetables. So we're all in this together. We all have these little sort of projects, which is quite good.
Yeah.
But thank you very much again for the questions coming in. If you've got any more, do ping them in. We have Nathalie for about half an hour or so more, which would be good. So I've got loads of questions I wanted to ask. So hopefully we'll be able to get through some of them. So if we move on to the next project. So we first met about a year or so ago. I think when we spoke a couple of days ago, we met about a year or so ago, just outside Silverstone, where we were launching Spinal Tract, the rallying program. So first of all, Spinal Tract, let's talk a little bit more about that, and then we can go a little bit more about the rallying. So Spinal Tract, how did that all come about?
So Spinal Tract was created by myself and my partner off the back of me going racing and people seeing what I was doing with disabilities and asking how they could get involved in track days. The main question was, is there an opportunity to drive your racing car? And although that wasn't appropriate, my partner and I had bought a Golf GTI track car from a friend of a friend who was a paraplegic. So it was completely set up with hand controls, and he'd spent a lot of money on it, making it absolutely spot on. I mean, it was an absolute weapon when we got it with a Revo map. I think in the highest spec, it kicks out about 380 brake horsepower, which is
wow,
quite fast for a Golf. And we had it. My partner had recently given up a career in surveying, which he had done for 10 years, and knew that his calling was motorsports. And we decided that we had the time, we had a car, and we had enough demand for setting something up. So we created Spinal Track as a not-for-profit to give people in my position the luxury that I'd had by being introduced to track days through driving experiences. And we discussed how it would work, and we decided that we would always use Spinal Track as something that would be offered for free, because I've been involved in disabled sport for a large proportion of my adult life, and with spinal injuries you either fall into one of two categories, and one, the accident wasn't your fault and you get a compensation payout, or the accident was your fault and you have to survive on either a job or government benefits. And living with a disability is expensive, and I'd seen the difference of people's lives and the struggle and the kind of easy route into rugby with that split. So I was determined that Spinal Tract wouldn't be one of those things that only people with money could do. So we set it up as a not-for-profit. We ran it out of our own pockets for the first kind of 3 months. I did like a kind of tester of the day with some close friends who I knew I could trust, all had disabilities, gave me some good constructive feedback. And then Silverstone got involved and gave us some track days that we could use. And within like the first 3 months, we had, I think, probably 6, 7 people through the program. And it got to the stage where we hadn't managed to get any support, and we had a conversation saying, look, if we don't get some financial backing, this is too expensive for us to continue funding on our own. And that week we had 2 anonymous donors that kept us afloat, and we then progressed with different people helping, and then Stanley Black & Decker picked us up and sponsored us, and that was 2016. 2020, we now have 2 track cars, we have 3 rally cars, we run a full track day program at Silverstone, we run a rally program at the McGloin Rally School at Weston, just outside Silverstone. And yeah, we're seeing around, I think it's, how many track days do we do a year? So we do about 10 to 12 track days a year, and then we do 2 rally days a month, each seeing 3 people on the days. So my maths aren't fantastic, so I'm not going to try and do those equations in my head, but we see a lot of disabled people come through the program, and the ambition of Spinal Track isn't to find the next disabled racing driver. It's to give people with disabilities an experience that leaves them with a perspective that anything is possible. Because once you drive around Silverstone at 120 miles an hour, overtaking a Lamborghini in the wet in a Golf GTI, suddenly you're like everyday issues. It just gives you a bit of a buzz. And if people off the back of it want to go forward into kind of motorsport, we're here to advise on the path to do that. And with the rally program, we were hoping at the end of the summer, but that timescale will have to change. We've got a full Motorsport UK spec rally car, and with the appropriate training, we're hoping to give people the opportunity to go forward with experiencing their first rally by renting out the car and the team. So yeah, it's cool. I think people enjoy it, and one of the other things about it is we don't take a wage from it. So Andrew and I run it as donating our time for free, and no one's paid in the charity. So we do it because we love the sport, and I do it because I love to give people the experience of what I fell in love with.
Absolutely. Obviously it's great, the passion that you guys have for the cause is absolutely superb. And when I went to your open day, sort of the media day last year, the cars are awesome. In fact, it wasn't long after seeing those Toyota GTA 6, I actually went to buy a Subaru version of the car.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Saw them and thought, you know what, they look great. Gonna have to possibly go and have a look at one. But what strikes me, I've had the car for a year now, and there's a little part of me that goes, oh, I'm not the best racing driver in the world. I'm going to sort of leave all the traction control, everything like that sorted. But what I found, the guys that jumped into these cars, a bit cautious to begin with, these are rally cars I don't really understand, but straight away got in smiles and very quick, I have to say. Do you find that with a lot of the guys, that sort of initial reaction is, oh, I'm not sure, I'm not comfortable with, and once they're in it, it's like you say, everything goes out the window and they focus on just the driving?
Well, we have the best instructors, so the whole ethos behind the day is to make people comfortable. We don't want to push anyone outside of their comfort zone. We'll let that progress naturally. I don't think I've ever seen anyone get out of any of those cars without a huge grin on their face, and I think some of the enjoyment of that also comes from friends and family that are watching these guys and girls go around either the rally stage or Silverstone GP circuit, because we've had various experiences that have been quite emotional, where the family members have just been absolutely in awe of their son or husband or daughter being able to do something like that. They're still in the pit wall watching people drive around at speed at Silverstone, and their relation is or friend is one of taking part in that, and neither people probably ever thought that that was possible before they were exposed to what we do. So yeah, it's great, and Andrew and I always go home with massive smiles on our faces because the reaction is just that's why we do it.
Absolutely, it's that massive big kick, and so you should. It was a great day. I was kind of the time would allowed, I probably would have had a go myself, but like I said, I bought the Subaru, and it was great memories ever since. So there we go. Helped sell a few cars that way.
Excellent.
So obviously we mentioned you did a lot of circuit racing to begin with, but you have done a bit of rallying, and I'm not going to ask you to choose between the two because that is like asking, you know.
I'll upset some people if I give the answer.
Yeah, I'm very
Either
sort of on
way.
the fence here. I'm very much from a rallying background. I love that sort of discipline, but you've done a couple of rallies yourself. You know, how did you find that from your circuit racing background?
I love rallying. The whole kind of setting up the rally program with Spinal Track was instigated by the fact that, you know, I'd been involved with track days and motorsport for a good number of years, but I'd never been able to experience what Andrew does, because Andrew's a rally driver. His dad won the Gold Star in the 70s. At the same time as Bill Gwynn won the Silver Star, and Bill was a massive catalyst for us creating the rally program because he wanted to see me in a rally car. Andrew was an instructor at the circuit at the rally school at the time, and I went in to meet Bill, and we chatted about racing, and he saw my passion for driving, and he just wanted to find a way to get me in a rally car, and the Spinal Track Rally program was born through funding from the Richard Burns Foundation, who Richard used to be an instructor at the Bill Gwynn Rally School. So going into rallying for me was something that I'd always wanted to do. I love driving in the wet. I love sliding about on the dirt, and that opportunity for me was all down to kind of Bill's persistence with getting Spinal Track set up so I could do my bars test and also then consequently offer the experience to other people. And Andrew wanted me to have a go at what he did, and he was my co-driver for the first event, which we were a little bit worried about because I don't take instruction well. And
yeah, it's the ending of a relationship, possibly sitting in a rally car.
well, we don't get on particularly well on the circuit when he instructs me, just because I kind of think racing's my thing, and although I know he's got so much experience to teach me, I can't help but kind of bark at, you know, instructions that he gives me with kind of reasons as to why I wasn't doing that in the first place. But in the rally kind of situation, I think because it's always been his thing, I think I fell into that quite naturally. And we actually were a really good team out on the stages, which was great. And I loved it. I mean, rallying is tiring because, you know, with a race, if you've got one race a day, then there's the big build up to the race and there's quali, and, you know, at the end of that, there's kind of coming down from it. Same if you have two races. But with rallying, it's start to finish. You know, there's no downtime, and it's so mentally draining, but it's so enjoyable as well. I feel with rallying, I don't get the same kind of stress levels that I do with racing. So I'm much more relaxed. And yeah, it's I think the discipline of not being able to see the stage beforehand is really good for my racing, because I'm not one of those people that can go out on a circuit and just go fast straight away. I have to learn it. Whereas in rallying, you don't have that luxury. So I think that the rallying, although I love it in its own kind of entity, it was really good for my racing as well, and I'm really looking forward to doing some more.
Excellent. And so you've done, as we've kind of touched on, for those who's joining us now, so Natalie's done a bit of sprinting, hill climbing, rallying, racing. Is there anything you'd like to tick off that motorsport bucket list? You know, from obviously behind the wheel, but also perhaps, you know, in the capacity with the FIA, that any projects you've got going on. What's that things you'd love to tick off the bucket list?
I'd love to learn how to properly drift. I think
Okay.
there's a boy racer inside me somewhere, I think.
You secretly did turn up to the right event at that Max Power sort of Fast and the
Yeah,
Furious event. That was your calling, yeah.
the first dealings I had with Motorsport UK was actually at Silverstone when I was doing my sprints, and they did a feature in the magazine on disabled participation in motorsports. And I got told off because in some of the downtime we were filming it on the old bridge circuit, and it was a filthy day. It was absolutely throwing it down. And I think in between lunch and our next kind of photo shoot, I just started doing donuts on the grass. And Tim actually had to come and tell me off. He was like, no, no, no. I was like, oh, sorry. So that was kind of my first introduction to Motorsport UK. So I'm surprised that I was called up to be a consultant years later. But I love kind of the drifting around on loose surfaces or in the wet. So I think drifting as a just something fun to do would be something that I would like to learn how to do properly. Um, but I think with my roles with Motorsport UK and the FIA, with the projects that I'm doing, I think just progressing with those different things, making sure that we really start shouting about the fact that Motorsport UK is so inclusive with disabled drivers. I think we're one of the leading ASNs in the world with this. And if you talk about my ambition with my work, if I had to talk about a legacy, what I really want to happen is for disabled kids to look at Formula One and actually believe that they could be the next driver. Because at the moment, kids that are disabled from a young age or are born with conditions that leave them with mobility problems probably watch Formula One and they think that that's so far away from what they can achieve. And if we can really start to shout about motorsport being for them, being for everyone, and they have ambition to do that, I think I will have done my job.
That's brilliant, and already the work is going a long way to make that happen. But as I said, there's always more we can do, and there's always little bits and pieces we can try and to implement and encourage, like you say, more people into the sport. Because as you say, it does seem like a pipe dream for many, but actually, there's motorsport is one of the most inclusive sports, I feel, anyway. But
Yeah.
there we go. It's very interesting as well. And drifting. Okay. We'll have to pick the story up in a year or two time and see how you get on with that, I think.
Definitely.
I've got a few sort of quick fire questions. We just appreciate the time as well. We've got sort of 10 minutes or so until we've completed the hour. We've been discussing all sorts. We've been discussing how you got started, the work you do with the FIA and Motorsport UK, Spinal Tract. So I've got a few questions which I've asked a few people. So we've done a few of these Facebook Lives on the British Rally Championship page, on World's Rally GB, and this is the first one on Motorsport UK. But I've asked the same sort of questions. It's always a nice way to sort of round out a session. So the first question of the sort of quick fire round, Nathalie, what's been your career highlight?
Giving Kimi Raikkonen the trophy at the Silverstone Grand Prix in 2018. Best day of my life. Absolutely fantastic.
Why was it the best?
Just that opportunity that David Richards gifted to me because he should have been up on that podium doing it. That was his privilege, and just Kimi's reaction to it. Being up there and in front of all those people and what that meant, and then Kimi just because I'd met him the day before and I barged through some people that were waiting for an autograph and introduced myself with no background, just said, "Hi Kimi, I'm Nathalie, I'll be presenting the trophy for the third place on the podium tomorrow." And I think he looked at me and went, "Of course
Okay.
you will." Crazy woman in wheelchair thinks she's going to be on the podium presenting a trophy. And when I kind of went round the corner to give him the trophy because he hadn't seen me when he walked onto the podium because they all waved to the crowd, he jumped down and he said, "It's you." And I said, "Well, I told you I'd be here." And he said, "You did." And it was just it was brilliant. I mean, just being at Silverstone on the podium, even if I was giving out the trophy and not receiving one, like Silverstone is so dear to me. It was where I met my partner. It was where I did my ARDS test. I did my first track day. It has so many special meanings to me that being able to do that was incredible. and I'll
That's
be
a great.
eternally grateful for it.
It's a great story. David Richards, if you're listening, there you go. It made someone very, very happy.
He did indeed.
Motorsport hero. Do you have a motorsport hero, or even perhaps a hero not solely in the sport, but just someone who's is kind of been an inspiration, but not solely on your career, but just someone who you've taken some good beliefs and some values from?
I get asked this quite a lot, and when I was involved with rugby, I was always asked for a kind of sporting hero. And to be completely honest, I don't have a sporting hero or a motorsport hero. The people that I am motivated by are normal people, mostly female family and friends, who do stuff in the face of adversity. I've got a friend who I met in hospital. She's called Gabby, and she had a spinal stroke and was paralysed from the chest down, limited arm function, and watching her come through her disability with two small kids. And she is so selfless with how she conducts her life post disability so that her disability isn't affecting her kids, is something that I'm so inspired by. And women like that who are strong without needing any recognition, without doing anything that is in the public eye or anything kind of out in the ordinary, they're the kind of people that inspire me, and men as well. But I really, really draw kind of confidence from women that do that, and they're my heroes. My mum's my hero. My sister's my hero. My family members. Shout out to my little brother who's popped up on the feed. But
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, from LA. But that's where I draw my inspiration from, and I know that that's not kind of the headline kind of what people were looking for with that question, but that's the honest truth.
No, that's actually quite refreshing, because it's you hear the same sort of answers all over and over again. Lewis Hamilton, or there's other drivers, and it's actually quite, there's other. Yeah, that's very refreshing answer. That's 10 out of 10 for that one. I like it. Gets approval from me. Has there been? Have you had a question I've kind of asked you? Have you had a hardest rival? Have you been someone who's either spurred you on competitively, or have you had someone that's you always, I don't know, at a rally, for example, you go, that's the name I'm looking at when it comes to time I want to get close to, or a person I want to try and beat? Is there any of that for you at all?
I mean, I'm massively competitive by nature, and I always want to be the best. I think in motorsports, I still feel like I'm quite new, and I think with my my ambitions, I always want to do the best that I can do. I know with motorsport that there are so many limiting factors that I like beating my own times. This season, or whenever the season starts, I'm going to be racing with Andrew, so we're double driving, and he's really quick, annoyingly, and he'll be someone that I aspire to try and match in terms of times, which are probably nigh on impossible, but you've got to give yourself some kind of something
like a yardstick.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't have like a rival, and I also think it's not massively healthy to get fixated on one particular person, because control what you can control. You can't control how they drive, you can control how you drive. And if your time is faster than theirs, that's great. If it's not, then that eats you alive if you can't ever achieve the impossible. So I tick away at my times. I try and be the best that I can be. And if one day I did manage to beat Andrew, I'd be the happiest woman on this planet.
I like how you're very modest as that answer built up, going, oh no, you shouldn't eat up of it. It's like, if I beat Andrew, yeah, absolutely, that's what it's all about.
It totally is.
It's a brilliant, that's again a great refreshing answer. And finally as well, I don't know if we've kind of touched on various sort of projects you worked on before, but if there was one car and one event you would love to do, what would it be? If you could do sort of one last event, also you're almost at the start of your career, but a lot of drivers look back and have that one event or one car they like to drive. Do you have something you would desperately love to go and do?
I think secretly I'd like to do the Dakar, which like Andrew keeps telling me that I need to do it, and I'd love to do it in like a buggy or something, like a Polaris, or you know, skidding around on dirt. I just think that the challenge of that would be so incredible. I'd get filthy and I would hate the sand, but I think that that would be something that is probably a pipe dream. You know, loads of drivers say Le Mans, and I don't think I've got any ambition to do Le Mans. It's like racing at the Nürburgring. I've got no ambition to do that. I value my life far too dearly, and my car really to push to those kind of limits. But I think Dakar would be so much fun. Watch this space. Who knows?
Oh, I like that. I like creating rumors and stories. So this could be very, very interesting to see. Be great. Dakar be an absolutely incredible challenge. Nathalie, it's been about an hour or so. It's been great. Lots of very interesting topics to discuss. And again, thank you very much for those who've sending questions. But if you've tuned into this a bit later, and want to ask some questions, do pop them down, and we can also pass them on to Nathalie. We can try and get them answered. So definitely want to try and get sort of those any of those sort of burning questions answered. But Nathalie, I've got to say thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you have a nice evening. And as you say, in this crazy times, and we'll speak very soon.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very much.